The fascination with three-dimensional experiences is far from a recent phenomenon, dating back since the silent film era in 1922 with The Power of Love. The pinnacle of 3D innovation was the groundbreaking release of James Cameron's Avatar. Nintendo is one company who has constantly embraced the allure of 3D. The 3DS is Nintendo's fourth handheld video game system. Released in 2012, it was a direct follow-up to the hugely popular Nintendo DS. However, the 3DS was not perfect from the start. I'm Mundy, and I'll be walking you through the history of the Nintendo 3DS year by year, while also commentating on my own personal experience with the system. The 3DS is shockingly not Nintendo's first attempt at 3D at all. Being the wacky company that they are, Nintendo has attempted 3D many times since they've started making games. Starting with their first home console ever, the Famicom had an add-on release in 1987 called the Famicom 3D System. The 3D System was a headset that plugged into the system to display stereoscopic images for select titles. However, with so few games being released, it was deemed a failure. The only noticeable games that worked with the add-on was Famicom Grand Prix 2, which is almost like a Mario Kart predecessor as it does feature Mario and Luigi driving cars, and Rad Racer, which still has its 3D functionality in the American version of the game, this time only using the standard red and blue glasses. Next up, Nintendo released the Virtual Boy, which is Nintendo's first international attempt at 3D, which ended up as another failure. The system was made to be as cheap as possible as a way to get something Nintendo on store shelves for the holiday season after the Nintendo 64 got delayed. It's a pair of goggles on a stand with terrible red and black graphics that lead to headaches and nausea and equally terrible games. And finally, for our little history lesson, the Nintendo GameCube was also supposed to have stereoscopic 3D. Early plans for Luigi's Mansion features a 3D option that was scrapped due to 3D TVs being very pricey at the time and not very consumer friendly. However, a decade later, with the success of Avatar, 3D was the biggest fad in media again, giving Nintendo the perfect opportunity to strike with 3D technology once more. The 3DS was initially unveiled at E3 2010 to high praise by reviewers and consumers alike. The system was available to demo on the show floor, where it was praised for being comfortable and having the graphical quality of that on the same level as the Xbox 360. Some of the 3DS's biggest titles for the first year were also unveiled at E3, like Kid Icarus Uprising, Mario Kart 7, and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. The console was even planned to get some big third-party support, with massive franchises like Kingdom Hearts, Metal Gear Solid, and Resident Evil making their way onto the platform. All of this hype led people to believe that this would be the greatest handheld system ever released. However, this did not happen at first. The 3DS is infamous for having one of the worst console launches of any Nintendo handheld, and one of the worst system launches in general. The system launched for $250 on March 27, 2011 in North America with very lackluster software. Easily the most impressive game on launch was Pilot Wings Resort. Pilot Wings Resort was a follow-up to the SNES launch title Pilot Wings and the N64 launch title Pilot Wings 64. While being a good game that gave you something to play day one, it's a game that doesn't excite general audiences enough to be the flagship title. The other games in the franchise did so well because they launched with must-play games that defined their generation. Pilot Wings launched with Super Mario World, one of the greatest 2D platformers of all time. Pilot Wings 64 launched with Super Mario 64, arguably one of the greatest and most important video games ever released. Pilot Wings has always been a good franchise, but worked best as a complementary title to go along with another big hitter, not being the big hitter themselves. Nintendo's other first-party games include Steel Diver, a slow submarine simulation game that got middling reviews, and Nintendogs Plus Cats, a sequel to the DS game many people already played to death half a decade ago. Third-party support was also very bad. Ubisoft was the biggest supporter, launching 4 games that day, with most receiving middling reviews, and other companies releasing very watered-down versions of their flagship series like The Sims 3, Madden Football, Street Fighter, Super Monkey Ball, and Ridge Racer, that all failed to capture many consumers during the first week of sales. The 3DS was burning money, and changes had to be made quick. In August of 2011, former President Satoru Iwata released a statement announcing that the console would be going from $250 to $170 on August 12th. The people who bought the console before the price cut were rewarded by getting 20 free NES and Game Boy Advance games. All the NES games made it to the Virtual Console eventually, but the Game Boy Advance games were exclusive to the Ambassador program. Along with the price cut, the two biggest games were mere months away from launching: Super Mario 3D Land and Mario Kart 7. These games are some of the best released on the platform from the most popular and casual-friendly franchises. Super Mario 3D Land, while being the weakest 3D Mario in my opinion, is still a fantastic game. The game features some great, fairly expansive levels for being on a handheld with plenty of collectibles and extras to find. While it can feel a little generic at times, it's still a fun game worth being a mainstay on the console. Mario Kart 7 is a fairly similar story. Not the greatest Mario Kart, but pretty good and made some very impactful changes to the Mario Kart franchise, like underwater driving, gliding, and car customization. These three factors are what kicked off the 3DS's initial success. It helps that Ocarina of Time 3D, a remake of the highest rated game of all time, launched a month before the price cut, allowing a whole new generation to experience the game in the best version released. While a rocky start, the 3DS was picking up steam and showed no signs of slowing down. 2012 was a very standard year for the 3DS. The biggest game was easily Kid Icarus Uprising. Created by Super Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai, the game revived and reinvented the long-dormant Kid Icarus franchise as a third-person shooter. While having a funky control style, holding the console with one hand, using the circle pad, and using the other hand exclusively on the touchscreen, it did great in reviews and sold over 1 million copies, the highest the Kid Icarus franchise has ever seen. However, selling 13 times as many copies as New Super Mario Bros. 2. The New Super Mario Bros. Franchise are all very generic 2D Mario platformers, but they're all still good games, just nothing special. The game's gimmick is to try to go for 1 million coins. It's not required, but it's the only thing really of note with this game. The game also brought back the Tanuki suit from Super Mario Bros. 3, just like 3D Land. It's a fun power-up and a great return, but it fails to give this game more of an identity, which this game is lacking in heavily. Other notable games include Mario Tennis Open and Paper Mario Sticker Star, both the start of the downfall of their respective series, Resident Evil Revelations, which is infamous for misspelling its own name on the box, and Rhythm Thief and Emperor's Treasure, a very underrated rhythm game by Sega. But the biggest release was a brand new console revision. The 3DS XL is kind of awful. There's something about this console I really dislike. I'm not a big fan of big handhelds. I think the 3DS is a perfect size. It molds perfectly in my hands, the buttons feel comfy and clicky and responsive, and the screens aren't the best, but they're far from the worst thing in the world. The 3DS XL, as the name suggests, is really big. To many, that's not an issue, to me, it is. But oh well, that's not the only reason I dislike this console. I hate how flimsy it is. It has such a cheap feel that makes me feel like I could snap it in half. I hate the screens and how washed out they are, and how they just straight up look bad. I don't care for the buttons, they're fine, but they're nothing more than just fine. And lastly, I hate how it looks. It looks fake and just overall really cheap. For how the system was advertised to be the Pro option, it feels way worse than the standard model and is easily my least favorite in the 3DS line. 2013 was by far the biggest year for the 3DS. To start, we got another console revision, the 2DS. By far the most interesting console in the 3DS line, the 2DS ditches the clamshell design for a flat, tablet-esque design designed for younger players. Despite how weird it looks, the 2DS is one of my favorites as it's really comfortable and feels really good to play games on. For only $130 at launch, discounted to only $80 in May of 2016, the 2DS was a no-brainer if you only cared about playing a select few games. And what a time to release an entry-level console, as 2013 is the home to some of the system's greatest games. Going in order of release, Fire Emblem Awakening was a last-ditch effort to save the Fire Emblem series as it was starting to severely underperform, and it worked. It was the highest rated game and sold the most the series has ever seen until 2019's Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Switch. March saw the release of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, a solid take on the Luigi's Mansion formula, but not my preferred gameplay style, and definitely the weakest of the three. I much prefer the singular big mansion of the first game compared to the more level-based second game. It's cool to see a 3D Luigi's Mansion come to fruition, however. Donkey Kong Country Returns released in May as a port of the Wii game without motion controls, arguably making it the best way to play that game. And in August, Mario & Luigi Dream Team released as a solid Mario RPG, but nowhere near as good as the first three. Ace Attorney Dual Destinies released on the eShop this year as well. It's a good game, but by far the weakest mainline game with some very high highs and some horrible lows. And that's all for the smaller 2013 releases. We still need to cover the highest selling and highest rated 3DS games that all released this year: Animal Crossing New Leaf, Pokemon X and Y, and The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Released in June, Animal Crossing New Leaf was a much needed update on the Animal Crossing formula, while keeping the game rooted in its traditions. The previous games were all very successful, especially the DS entry Wild World, but all got pretty stale after a while. They all had you buy a house, paying off debt to upgrade your house so you can pay off more debt, all while finding furniture and helping villagers. It gets pretty boring and repetitive after about a week. New Leaf fixes that by having you be the mayor of your town, along with many new shops and additions to give the game more content. Now you have much more control of your town, being able to start public projects or add special quirks like having shops open earlier or close later. It also added Tortimer's Island, a sub-area that allows you to collect unique bugs and fruit. New Leaf is easily the best and most robust Animal Crossing game, even outshining New Horizons, as most of that game's updated content came from this game. Next up, Pokemon X and Y are the first 3D Pokemon games. For being the biggest media franchise ever, the mainline games took a while to get to the 3DS. Spin-offs were coming out within the first year, but the mainline games were stuck on the DS, with Black and White 2 coming out in 2012. This changed with the release of X and Y in 2013. I really enjoy X and Y in spite of some major flaws. The game fails on a lot of fronts. The story is really bad and underbaked. There are many plot beats that should be there that are just missing, mostly with Team Flare. Lysander kinda just goes crazy out of nowhere and basically plots to rid the world of all life with little to no reason, without thinking of the many issues that come with that plan. The rivals are also the worst in the Pokemon franchise, no doubt about that. With there being 4 of them, none of them get proper character development or really any character traits, as they randomly get crammed into random parts of the story, reminding you that they even exist. The game is also very easy. The last gym only has 3 Pokemon, with all the Elite 4 members only having 4 Pokemon each. But in spite of all those issues, I really do enjoy X and Y a lot. Something about the design, the look, the quirks of this game makes me love it so much. While it has issues, I can look past them because I just have fun while playing the game. And to end 2013 came the release of The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Acting as a spiritual successor to the Super Nintendo classic, A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds is a top-down 2D Zelda game with the main gimmick of being able to stick to the walls to enter cracks between Hyrule and Lorule. Other than that, it's a very standard 2D Zelda game, and it's fantastic. You're allowed to tackle any dungeon in whatever order you want to, and there's tons of collectibles and side quests to find and complete. While I may not have much to say about the game, that does not mean it's bad or unremarkable in the slightest. In fact, it's one of my favorite Zelda games, and one of my favorite games on the platform. After the massive year that was 2013, 2014 is a lot less impactful while still being great for the system. 2014 saw the release of my 3 personal favorite 3DS games: Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, and Tomodachi Life. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, take all the gameplay additions like the EXP share, Mega Evolution, and 3D movement and put it into one of the greatest Pokemon stories. The game has amazing characters, actual difficult battles, and brand new gameplay like flying on Mega Latios or Latias and the Dex Nav, along with the new post-game, the Delta episode. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS was such a great port of Smash Bros. To a system that was on the same power scale as the Nintendo GameCube from 2001. Compared to its Wii U counterpart, Smash for 3DS was a little slower and was definitely harder to play at a higher level, but was made up for having amazing game modes and better stages. When Smash for Wii U and 3DS were the main Smash games, I found myself coming back to the 3DS version compared to the Wii U version, as I was just having more fun with it. Now I say was because with Ultimate on the Switch, there's zero reason to ever go back to Smash 3DS, with Ultimate giving you the, ultimate portable Smash Bros. Experience. But when this game was new, it was by far my favorite Smash game. and Tomodachi Life is the 3DS game I have easily put the most time into. The sequel to the Japan-only Tomodachi collection, Tomodachi Life has you put your Miis onto an island and you watch them live life. They'll ask you for clothes, food, new apartments, and you can give them whatever you want. They will have problems, make friends, fall in love, and play games with you. That's really the extent of the gameplay. The charm of the game comes from watching your friends, celebrities, video game characters, and whoever and whatever you want interact. It's a very simple game, but one that I come back to and make a new island almost every year. Some other notable games include Kirby's Triple Deluxe, Mario Golf World Tour, and Ultimate NES Remix. 2015 is where we start to see the downfall of the 3DS. Starting with positives, we have a new console revision, the new 3DS XL. The new system takes a lot of complaints of the original 3DS and fixes them. A second circle pad for compatible games, more powerful internals to run bigger games, eye tracking 3D, and a ZL and ZR button, while keeping the same size of the 3DS XL and the better battery life. The console is undoubtedly the best 3DS revision, as it's everything you could have ever asked for in a 3DS. However, what if you have small hands and prefer a smaller console like me? Well, you could get the regular new 3DS in Japan only. Nintendo never released the regular sized new 3DS in America, only the XL, which is a shame, but not too bad all things considered, as the XL is still a fantastic console. Releasing alongside the new 3DS is a remake of my favorite game of all time, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D. While still being a fantastic game with one of the greatest stories and gameplay loops I've ever experienced in any game ever, Majora's Mask 3D is nowhere near as good as the N64 original. Director Eiji Aonuma has stated his disdain for the rushed N64 version, with them having to rush the game to meet the year deadline Shigeru Miyamoto gave the team. So when a Majora's Mask remake was talked about after the Ocarina remake came out, Aonuma was hesitant. When work started on the Majora's Mask remake, they overcorrected some issues with the first game. Deku Link's spin doesn't produce speed anymore, Goron Link's roll is not as smooth as it was in the N64 version, and Zora Link's swimming is very, very slow. All the bosses are now simplified with easy to hit weak points, and some side quests are mixed around to give unfitting items now. Don't get me wrong, this is still a good remake of my favorite game, it's just that the N64 version is a lot better in most regards. And that's really it for 2015. Looking at the list of released games, everything else was pretty bad, including Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, Chibi Robo Ziplash, Happy Home Designer, and Triforce Heroes. This is a trend that continues on for the rest of the 3DS's life. 2016 saw the release of Pokemon Sun and Moon, Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, and Kirby Planet Robobot, all pretty good games, but also saw the release of Metroid Prime Federation Force, Mario Maker for 3DS, and Mario & Luigi Paper Jam, all low points in their respective series. 2017 saw the weirdest and worst console revision, the new 2DS, a budget new 3DS that had no place in Nintendo's lineup as it was too expensive for casuals and too late for hardcore fans, as this year came out when the Switch came out, along with abysmal games for the 3DS like Mario Party The Top 100, Hey Pikmin, and Mario Sports Superstars. At least Miitopia was fantastic. WarioWare Gold and Luigi's Mansion came out in 2018 and were both really good, but this was a year after the Switch came out. Why weren't they on the Switch? In 2019, the last year of the 3DS's life, ended on a sad whimper, with only 5 games releasing throughout the whole year, one of them killing the studio that made it, Alpha Dream. Nintendo's last game for the platform was Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, a poor port of the Wii Classic that had people asking one question: why wasn't it on the Switch? The 3DS is one of my favorite consoles of all time. Despite how poorly the system ended, with it constantly being compared to the Switch during its last 3 years, I still think it's amazing. Out of all the previous Nintendo consoles, this is the one I find myself going back to constantly. The console has some of my favorite games of all time, and a massive library spanning from the sizable Virtual Console, to the DS Treasure Trove, to the amazing 3DS exclusives. I love this console and find it to be one of Nintendo's best. Thank you for watching our video of the history of and my personal experiences with the Nintendo 3DS. Let us know your thoughts of the 3DS family down below in the comments, and subscribe to Byte BSU for more video essay content, along with our weekly checkpoints and our monthly biting questions.